Mike's on Mike is made possible by contributions from listeners like you to the Jacksonville History Center. One city, many stories. Online at jackshistory.org.
Let's start out with the simplest question I could come up with, because I'm known for simple questions, which is, why did you write the book and what inspired it?
Well, actually...
We should say, by the way, as we're talking about
Yeah.
it, it's called Striving for Justice, A Black Sheriff in the Deep South by Nathaniel Glover.
It's excellent, incredible book.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question, because for years I have been encouraged to write about my life. I mean, when you look at a situation where my background, in fact, having arrested and all of that, and I end up being a sheriff, just so many people thought it was worthy to be documented. Mm-hmm. And, of course, me thinking a little cynical at the time was just thinking they're trying to be complimentary, and people say things sometimes disingenuously to be complimentary. And so I held off a little longer than I should have, to be honest with you, because when I was eventually convinced, and it was a convincing team, really, Mike Freed, Winyona Kendricks, and Walt Bucell. And these were people that I trust. And they came to me and said, look, we'll do what's necessary to get this book published. All you have to do is talk. And it was almost like a deal I couldn't refuse. But what it did do, it energized me to start writing and start talking. And to this day, I will say it's been one of my great blessings, because I just started to look at what was out there, and me recalling it, it became very, very important. And it was a couple of things that was the main message. Number one, I'll start with number one, and that was, it could be very inspirational, motivational, and encouraging for someone who might have some doubts about could they do something that they might have dreamed about, thought they can do, and that kind of thing, because that was, I think, foremost in my mind. And then the other part, striving for justice, was I wanted to talk a little bit about the disparities in the criminal justice system. And of course, I wanted to kind of leave a message there as well. And with me, myself, having had the privilege of being in law enforcement for almost 40 years, arresting people, and then being blessed with the privilege of going back to my alma mater as president, and think of the contrast there. I spent that long in law enforcement putting people in jail, people to a great degree, many of which look like me, and then I was able to go back and graduate 8 college classes at Edward Waters College, and in effect revive the college and get it back in the mainstream. And I can tell you that was another blessing. And back to the beginning of your question, I needed to tell somebody.
Mm-hmm. Boy, are we glad you did.
Mike? You know, Sheriff, yeah, if I could step in just a minute. I think in all of our opinion, and in the opinion of so many people, you will go down in history as one of Jacksonville's most significant citizens in the past century.
Bar none.
And I mean that, and I think you know I mean that very sincerely. And it's not just a belief, the held by me, but held by many. And the three of us have read your book. I think Hightower says he's read it 2 or 3 times now. He has nothing else to do.
That's true.
And
Sue is very happy, by the way, that he's reading instead of bothering
and you
her.
tell you tell your life story with great grace, insight, and integrity, which is who you are, I think. And I want to ask you something about the book now. You write about Axe Handle Saturday
Yes.
In the summer of 1960. Tell us what Jacksonville was like. Take us back. What was Jacksonville like in the summer of 1960?
Well, Jacksonville was pretty much a racist city. Let me just say it the way it was. But I was kind of fortunate enough, and I call it being fortunate. I had parents who never really talk negatively about white people. And if I was going to assess the frequency when they talked about white people, I would say the reverence in which they talked about them outweighed any negative responses. So I never grew up with the sense of those bad white people, and which incidentally was somewhat surprising with some of my peers, but it wasn't like we were challenging each other. It's just that I didn't hold that. But when I was encountered after getting off work at Morrison Cafeteria that day, that morning, as we talked about in the book, there were some sit-in demonstrations going on downtown. The youth organization in the NAACP was routinely, really, doing sit-in demonstrations on Saturday morning in downtown establishments. And this morning, now, this is something that when it was happening and unfolding, I didn't know anything about, but they were scheduled to conduct a sit-in demonstration at Woolworth. And, of course, that was right across the street, kind of catty corner, from Morrison Cafeteria. And I was one of the young men who had a weekend job. I was in school, but I had a weekend job at Morrison, which was a true blessing. And working in the dish room, as a matter of fact. Well, that morning, our manager of the whole cafeteria came down to the dish room where I was working and told all of us to leave. Get out of here right now. Now, he didn't go into the detail, but he was concerned about our safety. And incidentally, all of us were black, African Americans, so he told us just drop what we were doing. And I can tell you, people just stopped and cleared out. Well, my job was consisted of a lot of things, but the last thing I was supposed to do was to mop the floor after everybody left. Now, I had permission to drop the mop and get out of there, but my work ethic wouldn't allow me to do that. So I mopped the floor before I left, which put me maybe 30 or 45 minutes behind everybody else. But when I left that morning, I walked into a mob of Ku Klux Klansmen and white supremacists, and they had axe handles and baseball bats. Now, what was kind of peculiar, I didn't see one person with the old axe handle. They were all brand new. And they quickly encircled me, and they started to hit me. And it was a police officer standing just outside of the circle where I was in the middle, and they were calling me all kind of names other than Nathaniel, and actually hitting me. And so I got an opportunity to run to the officer and ask him, please help me. And he said, you better get out of here before they kill you. And I ran. And I tell you, I know that they were chasing me, but I ran, and I was so afraid because I was afraid that one of them was going to hit me in the head and I was going down, and then there was going to be a beating frenzy and they would kill me. So I ran all the way home, and when I got home, I cried. And to this day, I don't remember ever having any excruciating pain anywhere. But the reason I cried was because I was so afraid, and I had ran. And in my neighborhood, you didn't run away from a fight. If you ran away from a fight, they will call you a coward, and you would have to live with that for the rest of your life. And so that's the reason I cried so long, and I was so ashamed. And so when I stopped crying, I said to myself, and I made this pledge, that I would never run away from another fight. I would rather die before I did that, because I never wanted to feel like that again. And I can tell you the worst moment in my life, and I've referred to it as a possible contemporary lynching attempt at the time. If they had killed me, that's what it would have been. But what it did, it gave me a sense that all challenges that I was confronted with that took courage, if I walked away from it, I knew that that day will come back on how I felt. So that, in a way, encouraged me to confront whatever the challenges are, and it changed my life. So if you look at it in its quintessential sense, you could very well say it was a positive more than a negative as it relates to me. And so I survived it, but I think it made me a better person.
Well, there's no question God had another purpose for you. I mean, there was no question God had another purpose for you. And you've spent your whole life fighting for others. So, yeah, I can't imagine what you went through, but he had another purpose for you, and you did it.
Well, I appreciate you going to the spiritual side of it, because I think that was the essence of it. And I sometimes think to myself, the Lord probably said, I want to put a level of courage in you that would be second to none, but I'm going to have to work a little hard on you. So he sent me through something real difficult, and that was one. I think the Lord could have been a little more subtle, and I would have got the message. But it was quite frightening.
We won't go there. We won't judge. We won't judge him on that one.
Thank you, Michael.
Wow, what a powerful story! Yeah, extraordinary. And I guess it must seem like it was just yesterday.
It's always right there. And a side story, and I remember when I was delivering a speech as sheriff, and a gentleman came up to me he said, I would like to talk to you, please. And I told him, because at that time I had just gotten elected, and it was almost like a rock star. After speeches and that kind of thing, people would be lining up to shake my hand and that kind of thing. But this guy stood off to the side, and he waited, and he waited. And after I finished shaking all of those hands, after that speech, he walked up and said he wanted to apologize. And I said to him, what did you do? He said, I was there that Saturday morning.
Wow. Golly.
Now listen.
That's got to be heavy.
Now, you get another wow when you looked in this man's eyes and he was crying. He had tears coming down. And he asked me for forgiveness. And of course, I forgave him. And to this day, maybe I should have gone into a little more detail and tell him it had been somewhat of a blessing for me, too. But I didn't, but I certainly made it clear to him that I forgive you. Now, I'm sorry that I didn't question him a little more, because when he apologized, I thought he might have been one that was in the group. But he could have been just one that was there that morning.
Just observing.
Yeah.
And step in to help you.
Yeah, but in any event, it was a moving moment.
Sheriff, can we segue into something else? That particular Saturday is not the first time you confronted that, nor the last. I'm confident of that. Tell us what it was like as a young black police officer when you were growing up, or when you were growing up in the sheriff's department, or the police department, and tell us the role that Mayor Lou Ritter played in helping you become a police officer.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to tell you about a few incidents in order to get there. I grew up in what people generally call, and often call, the ghettos of Jacksonville. And I always wanted to be a police officer. I used to listen to the radio programs and didn't have anything close to a TV, but kind of a side note to that, the people next door did have a TV, but they put it directly in front of their window.
Oh, so you can.
And I was able to look across and occasionally see TV program. But I listened to the radios and listened to Dragnet, Michael Shane, Johnny Dollar, and all of that. But I wanted to be a police officer. And I wanted to be a detective. Now, at that time, there were really no, maybe they had one or two black detectives, but that was a lofty goal. And what I actually saw in my neighborhood of police officers, they would come in the neighborhood and they would visit certain houses. Now, the houses they would visit were what we call at the time moonshine houses. But they didn't take any enforcement. They would just go in and come out. Now, everybody knew they were selling moonshine. So the word was that they were taking some kind of encouragement not to do any enforcement. So I don't know about that, but it did not discourage me. So I wanted to be a police officer so badly. But I was working at Morrison Cafeteria and I got arrested after work one night. And the reason I got arrested was that the police had Morrison staked out. apparently the cafeteria had complained about some of the employees stealing steaks, the sirloin steaks. And they were searching everybody leaving the cafeteria that night. Well, when I came out, it was maybe 10 o'clock. They searched me, and I had 2 napkins in my pocket. Mike got the number right at the beginning of this conversation.
Mike Miller did that,
Mike,
not Hightower.
yeah, not Mike Hightower. Mike
Or
Miller.
Tolbert.
Or Tolbert.
Yeah, Tolbert. But I had the 2 napkins in my pocket, and when the detectives searched me, they found the napkins, and they said, if you don't tell us who's stealing these steaks, we're going to put you in jail for these napkins. Now, first, I didn't believe that. And secondly, I didn't know who was stealing the steaks. The only steaks I saw usually were half eaten, and because I worked in the dish room, so I didn't even have access to steaks. But they arrested me for that. And I had a young man with me. He was a juvenile at the time. He was arrested as well, but he was sheltered. I went to jail. And all of this was such an adventure. I remember even when I was in jail, I was insulted because I'm sitting there in jail wondering what I'm going to do, call my mother, who had already said, if any of us ever got in jail, don't call her. She going to leave us down there to do the time, I guess. And I know I didn't
Mama's
want to.
love.
Nothing like it.
I didn't want to call her, but I'm sitting there, and the guys in jail, they're just bragging about their, criminal prowess. I mean, had one guy talking about how many houses he broke in, another guy talking about how many robberies he made and he had committed, and another guy talking about how many cars he stole. And I was sitting there with my head down, hoping they didn't ask me anything.
2 napkins.
Thank you, Mike. You're so helpful. but
This is Mike Miller's last show.
yeah, yes.
It's going to be 2 mics on Mike after this.
Yeah. So I was, and they asked me, hey, buddy, what did you steal? What did you do? So I tried to blow it up a little. I said, larceny. That worked for a minute until he said, what did you steal? So I tried to whisper 2 napkins. And they just all did the same thing my interviewers are doing. They just all just laugh. He calling the other guys down the block. We got a guy in here stole 2 napkins. But it was a total humiliation. But
Let's clarify now why you had the napkins in your pocket, because you didn't steal them.
No. It wasn't the intent to steal them. I had the napkins in my pocket because we would use the napkins as handkerchiefs because it was so hot in the dish room. Right. And glad you asked that, because the next morning when I went to court, the manager of the cafeteria came down and testified on my behalf. And
Same man who told you to get out.
No, that wasn't it was my supervisor.
Right.
See, the person that told us to leave was over the whole cafeteria. But he did testify, but to get to the point where I had to eventually make the call to my home, my odds were good because I had my 2 sisters there, my brother, my father, and my mother. So I thought, well, maybe somebody else will answer the phone. Didn't work. She answered. But she never said anything but told my father to come down and get me out of jail. And he did. But the good thing about that, Mike, when he came down, got me out of jail, to this day, neither my mother or my father asked me, did I steal those napkins? And in addition to that, I had to go to court the next day. Judge John Santora was the judge. And when I showed up, had to go to court the next day, I had standing alongside me my father's boss, he called him, boss man, who was white, and my supervisor, who was white. And they all testified on my behalf. Now, some police officers had already told my father to tell me to plead guilty, and they assured him that nothing would happen. And my father told me to plead guilty, and I did plead guilty. And after my father's boss testified on my family, and my boss testified about me and the circumstances of the napkins, and it wasn't an unusual thing for people who work in this room to have a napkin in their pocket, using it as a handkerchief. The judge discharged the case. So I was always grateful to Judge Santora, too. Mm-hmm. So I had 3 white people standing up there testifying on my behalf, and the case was discharged. Now, I went for years thinking that me having pleaded guilty, I was convicted of that crime, until I found out later that he had discharged it, and the records were sealed later on. Incidentally, didn't get them records sealed until later when Hank Cox was the state attorney, and he walked up to me one day in court. I was in court on another case, and said he was just going to walk through the process as an attorney and get my record sealed, and that's what he did.
And then, to Mike's point, how Lou Ritter then, how that came?
Well, when I actually, to go back, when I got ready to apply to become a police officer, after everybody told me it was no point in me applying, because if you've been arrested, they just don't hire people who've been arrested. And but for whatever reason, I said I was going to try anyway, and I applied. Now, this is after I had graduated from college, and I was thinking that the college degree will make a difference, because at that time you could become a police officer with a high school degree or a GED, and so it looked like that nothing was going to happen, though, because when I applied, nothing really happened until one day my brother called me, and he said, who incidentally he was the manager at the black folk pool on 4th and Jefferson, told me to come down. He wanted me to meet somebody, and when I went down there, he wanted me to meet an officer by the name of Marvin Young, who was an African-American officer. And the thing about Marvin Young was he was one of those African-Americans who were able to speak extremely well and some would call even proper, and some would use the term, he tried to talk like white folk, and so he was just one of those individuals, and my brother told him my story that I was trying to become a police officer. He asked me about the situation. I went over the details of the situation, and he said, "Oh my goodness, that's hard to believe." And then he said to me, standing right there after I explained that to him, that we need to go see the mayor. And I didn't have too much confidence in that, but I mean, you don't just go see the mayor. And I said, "Oh, okay, when you want to get together?" He said, "Get together? We're going right now." So, I didn't think I was dressed properly or anything. So I said, okay. But again, my cynical nature kicked in. So I'm trying to do what my brother told me to do. He was my older brother. And I said, okay, to myself, we just go ahead and get this over with. And we went downtown and went to City Hall, got on the elevator, went up, and I'm just in tow. I'm right behind him, trying to make sure we check this box. And so I can tell my brother I did what you told me to do. And when Marvin Young walked in that office, the secretary jumped up and said, "Hey, Marvin, how's the children?" And then started calling the children names. I said, "Oh my God, we own something here." and we were, because Marvin took me in there, and I talked to the mayor, told him my situation, and all I can hear Marvin keep saying is he's a college graduate too. He just graduated from college and that kind of thing. And the mayor called me over. He said a few things to me. And then I left. And I really didn't think, the mayor was going to do much about it. But I learned later that the mayor went down to the civil service administration building and told the administrator that he wanted Nathaniel Glover to take the test to become a police officer. And she said, "We saw his application, and we have looked at it, and we know he's a college graduate and all of that, but we do not hire people who've been in jail." As simple as that. And oh, by the way, Mr. Mayor, I do not work for the mayor's office. I work for the Civil Service Board. They had I think a 5-member board then. And the mayor told her, "By the way, I'm looking at appointing some new Civil Service Board members."
It's good to be king, isn't it?
Yeah. And he turned around and walked off. And Nathaniel Glover got called down to take the test.
That's a great
and incidentally ended up being a historic sheriff, not in just Jacksonville, but Florida, and later inducted into the Law Enforcement Hall of Fame.
Wow. Guys, I'm going to jump in here for just a moment. We have only scratched the surface of this great man's story. There's so much more to talk about. We want to talk about his years as being sheriff. We want to talk about the mayoral campaign that he had. There are just so many other things that we want to do. We want to split this up, if we can, into 2 segments. So we're going to wrap things up for this edition of Mike's on Mike. And once again, we want to thank Alan Bliss and everybody at the Jacksonville Historical Society for sponsoring our program, and having you on board as a partner is a great honor for us, and we are very, very grateful for that. Sheriff, We're going to just take a short time out, and we'll all be back, and we'll begin the conversation again and start talking about your years as sheriff, as well as your campaign. So thanks for joining us this episode, and stick around, because next week's episode will just take off from where we are right now. And we hope you have a good week. Thanks for joining us on Mike's on Mike.
Thank you all. Thanks for coming.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and Mike Miller can be found at your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook and YouTube. Learn more at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversations with Mike's on Mike.